Bridget, how are you?
Hi, I am doing well.
It's very, very late for you over
Mhm.
there in the US. And which part of the US are you in?
I am in West Virginia on the East Coast.
Right. And I have to say, thank you so much. We did have lots of technical glitches from my side. So thank you so much for your patience. And I am just so delighted to bring this topic to the show tonight because there are so many spiritual healers and leaders out there that are doing the good works just like you do and are very, very gifted. But sometimes they struggle with a lot of the processes and the strategies.
Mhm.
And, in that process and strategy, they can feel quite overwhelmed. And this is going to be a really big story about how they can quantum leap and stand on your shoulders and really learn so much about themselves, about alchemizing and really just bringing in the best of what everybody is called to do, and especially for people that you're talking to, light workers, spiritual healers, and all of these elements. So, it all kind of started, firstly, your coaching journey started out when you were working in a hospital and you were actually invited to be coached, and you were told that you ought to become a coach. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct. Yeah.
That's amazing. And, what was it? What do you reckon their methodology was that they were kind of using when you think back to the coaching you were receiving back then?
Um, they really came from that place of seeing not me who was sitting in front of them, but the whole of me, the the naturally whole resourceful person that my soul and my spirit is, and helping me to pull that out beyond all the stuff that had been loaded on top of me throughout different experiences through my life.
Right. So they really were not just mainstream traditional. They literally could see into your soul, which is in the work now in the field that you are doing. Because as an alchemist and as a coach who is really assisting people to alchemize their lives so that they can, go from rejection to being able to totally fall in love with themselves and just
Mhm.
have their own reasons for loving and just accepting themselves. Why do you think rejection is such a killer for people perhaps that are wanting to be successful? What are the stories that play around rejection and feelings of rejection, and how does it affect people?
I feel like rejection comes in many forms. It can come from, people outside of you not liking the way you look or talking mean to you. It can come from family members seeing you as, not accepting the way the family does things. It can come from your job, where just the environment there doesn't allow you to be all of who you are because there are strict rules and guidelines that you have to follow. So you can't really be all of yourself. So I feel like rejection is really a big part of all of our lives, and we just don't always name it rejection.
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to look at ways of how people can combat that later in the show. But right now, your earliest childhood memory goes back to being taunted on a school bus and then made to feel like it's okay by a very well-meaning mother, obviously, that just wanted to do the right thing. And this, it just enlightens and highlights to me that even when you are you got your children's best interests at heart,
Yeah.
it's not always the right thing to say to someone, it's going to be okay, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because tell me about that incidence in your mind of how that 7-year-old little girl felt and what happened to you on the bus, and then, how that impacted you to, I mean, your mother well meaning and loving words, but how it kind of just, I guess, left you feeling like, you were perhaps not important, or what had happened to you didn't have any meaning.
Yeah. So I was 7 years old, coming home from school. I went to a private school, and so we had uniforms. So we all dressed the same, but I had red hair. I had a pixie cut at the time, and the kids on the bus were just picking on me. They were making fun of the way my hair looked. They were making fun of the way I talked, making fun of my family, because they tended to be a little more. They were a little more religious than other people's families, and so I got teased for that. And by the time I got to my stop, I was in tears, and of course, then I was being teased because I was crying, and it just
Mm.
was this overwhelming meanness. And I remember getting off the bus and running home with my little my little bag and going in the house. And my mom's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I honestly, when I was trying to tell her, I couldn't even express myself. I'm a 7-year-old kid, and I didn't have all the words to say how I was feeling about what, or you know, the like the kids were doing this or the kids were doing that, but I couldn't actually explain all the feelings that I had because I was a highly sensitive child, and even my parents sometimes didn't know how to handle that. And so my mom was like, "It's going to be okay, just it's, I love my mother, and she just wanted to make it better, but her way of making it better was just, trying to help me brush it off and just, let it
Mm.
go. You don't have to pay attention. They're just, they're just jealous of you, or they were just being mean. Don't, it's not really about you, type of thing. But
Yeah,
whereas I'm this highly sensitive person, I took it all in, meaning this was me.
yeah,
I was bad. I was ugly. I was not worthy. I was not enough.
yeah, yeah. And I hear you. I hear you. I had a very bad incident just quickly when I was the same age, and 7 is a very imperative age of those formative years of where we do take everything in and we do start developing our value systems and, our patterns and our behaviors. And, at the age of 7, something really drastic did happen to me where I was actually beaten up by a person who was only a kid themselves, but a trusted member to our family. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, when my parents see me, they're going to die, because I knew how bad I looked. And yet I didn't get the response that I thought I would get. And I have the most loving parents in the world. And after the actual occasion, and this had layers and layers that literally impacted me on so many levels for the rest of, right up until I healed myself and I had to go through such, incredible healing, which is in my middle ages, right? But at that time, when my parents cared deeply for me, loved me, but wanted me to be just okay. I think our parents want us to be okay. But then I think to myself, I understand that a lot of my thoughts about myself and the world stemmed from the responses of other people. And my question is to you, Bridget, what do you think would be an ideal, if there is such a thing as an ideal? And I know you're not the family therapist. God bless Virginia Satir. However, what do you believe would be a better response? Because I feel that for me, if my parents if I had felt like they had sided with me, maybe I would have liked it at the time if they turned on that person and had something done that was really quite dramatic, but then that could have had another effect. So have you got any answers to that? Like, as a parent, how do we respond? What's the best thing to do when your child is in that situation?
So, what I've learned is when a child is in that situation, to come down to their level, to be at their eye level, and really listen and express an interest in everything they're feeling, and to try and help them find a way to express themselves. When I work with my granddaughter, sometimes I will use a puppet because they can talk to a puppet or a stuffed animal better than they can to their mommy or their daddy sometimes.
Hmm.
So I will use a puppet and allow expressions to come out. And the other thing is, so they have this stress energy in their body, it's in their nervous system now. Hug them, dance with them, get the energy to move through their body, because they don't know how to do that right now. And
Yes.
even taking and having coloring time with them to express their emotions in crayons and color, or paint, will help to get the energy through their body so it doesn't stay there.
That's a great point. I love that because it's true. Energy moves, and energy is much better when it is moving, because it's like a frequency and it's like money. Money needs to move and it's a currency, right?
Mhm.
And you're right. If we get caught up in something stressful, the first thing we tend to do is get very stuck inside our head. And then that stuckness gets us stuck inside our body. And we even hold ourselves in a specific way when we are stressed or angry or feeling that emotion. So it's interesting, like you'll hear people say, oh, I go off to the gym or I run every single day. But it's an excellent point that you have said, that whether you've got a child or even in yourself, when you're feeling that emotional feeling inside your body, to move it. So,
Mhm.
so that's amazing. That's amazing. And you say too, because obviously you work really well as an empath, but just going back from the age of 7, you said that you felt like you were always different. And
Mhm.
even when you were born, you had to be put on a specific diet. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, so I was born with PKU, which is phenylketonuria. It's they prick the baby's heel when they're born to test for it. So I was born with that. I'm missing the enzyme to get rid of the phenylalanine that's found in proteins.
Right.
So if I would not, I had to be on the diet from 0 to 7, where I couldn't have proteins, and I had a special drink that I had to drink to get my proteins. So if my mom had to keep track of everything I took in, everything I ate, and it was a lot of fruits and vegetables because they don't have the protein and the enzyme from that I couldn't digest. And if I wouldn't have, and if my mom wouldn't have done a good job, I would have been mentally retarded.
Wow, you're kidding me. Do you
Yeah.
think there's people that can this go unmissed? Like, are there kids floating out there that have this and they're not diagnosed, or is it almost something that every baby will know?
Every baby's tested now. Before the 70s, though, it was missed and it was not known about. So starting in, I don't know if it was the late 60s, and I was born in 70, so 60s, somewhere in there, it started to be tested on a regular basis. But even
Right.
when I was born, it was still a sort of a guinea pig type of thing. They were trying this out to see how it would work, keeping the kid on, because they at the time they thought that your brain stopped growing at about age of 7. Now we know so much more than that.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, I had to be on this special diet, which made me different. I couldn't have birthday cake, cupcakes, anything with a protein in it. And so all of my friends could eat all this stuff. And if I went to a birthday party, I couldn't eat anything that they could. So I
Wow.
felt so much like an outcast. Like I didn't fit in, I didn't
Mm.
belong. And
So there's another rejection. So you've got the 7-year-old girl that feels the rejection. You've got, even as a baby and growing up with this kind of you know situation, that you felt different and you felt like you didn't fit in.
yeah, I really didn't. And then being highly sensitive, and at that point in time, that wasn't even a term. So, and nobody really knew what to do. My parents, didn't even know. I was so sensitive. Loud noises affected me. Yelling, like yelling would just scare me, and I would go hide in my room sometimes. And I even,
Wow.
I even remember a time like I didn't like confrontation. I would avoid confrontation because of the way it affected me, and I would avoid it. And my dad did not like that. And one time he got so mad he punched a hole in my door, and I went out the window. I came back later, and we sat down and talked. But it scared me so much, and
Mm.
and
So
I had
confrontation and anything like noise and all of those elements comes from this. And you say that a diet can change that?
No, the diet had nothing to do with that. The diet
Okay.
was something totally separate. It was just the being highly sensitive, and that wasn't really a recognized thing at the time. I was also extremely shy. I I
Mm.
couldn't even call my friends on the phone. My parents had to do it. Yeah.
Wow. And you feel like so what was, are you actually healed from that?
Yes. Well, not the
Okay, so
PKU runs with me forever. I can't heal from that.
right.
But the emotion, so highly sensitive, I'm always highly sensitive. I just know now how to protect myself from the onslaught of other people's energies. And as for the shyness, I went through a lot of healing in my 40s and midlife to get to a point where I don't have the anxiety that I used to have being in groups and crowds. I really healed
Yeah.
that shyness from the little girl. I actually, what it was I healed my inner child.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that so that people know how they can really, even spiritual healers and leaders, when you can understand the depth of the alchemy that Bridget does. That's when everything can really just pivot for the greater good in your life. But you had another huge, big rejection at the age of 27, and that took your life on a drastic turn. Your expectations and everything that you had actually thought in your life were completely shattered. Your values, and what you considered to be the normal, especially being a girl growing up in the Catholic. Can you talk us around what was that big rejection that then came at the age of 27?
So at the time I was married, and I'd been married for 7 years. I had a 3-year-old little boy, and my ex came out of the closet, and I had to choose to get divorced because he was okay if we just stayed living in the same house, and he could have his cake and eat it too, type of thing. And I knew that I had to leave, and it went against everything I believed in, everything I grew up believing in. It broke my what I thought happened when you grew up. You got married, you lived together, you lived together forever, you raised your kids, you sat in rocking chairs when you were old, and all of that was gone. So everything I
Mm.
thought life would be, everything I believed in, all the values I held were totally shattered, because and nothing held any value anymore, and I was at a ground zero, physically, mentally, emotionally. There was nothing left.
My gosh, so just when you got to ground zero, and one can only, you must have gone through some healing where you were able to look at, I suppose, also where that man came from, and how difficult it must have been, for him to be living so incongruently. Like, for you like to have that your whole world shattered by a decision that he made. And yet you wonder if when he got married, whether he knew that. Do you think he knew that then, or do you think it was like one of these things, like if you've heard the Bruce Jenner story, and how he's become Caitlyn Jenner now today.
Yeah.
And if you watch the Kardashians, he went to each and every one of them. But then as you kind of go on and you find out a lot of the biography, there were things about him from way back when that he really, 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 he was struggling always with his sexuality. Do you think he knew? Do you think your husband knew
He
back
said he
then, your
did.
ex-husband?
He knew, but
Yeah,
he felt like he had to deny that part of him because it was not accepted.
yeah. Were you able to forgive him?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
was. You know what? He's a good guy. He's still very much in our son's life, you know.
Oh, that's good.
And
Yeah.
so when we're around each other, we don't have any problems or anything like
Mm,
that. And I realized it was a huge oh, okay, there's a little. So growing up in Wisconsin in the 70s and 80s, I didn't even know what gay was. Okay. I had
it
no
was
clue.
like that.
So
Mm,
here's the worst part. So when he came out, I actually laughed because it was so surreal and unreal to
yeah.
me that
Maybe you thought he was joking too.
I sort of did. I'm like, okay, this is some weird joke because I'm not even really sure what this means. And I just remember thinking, what am I going to do now? I was a stay-at-home mom. I've never gone to college and gotten any degrees. I'd never worked. So I was suddenly, okay, I'm going to separate. I'm going to get divorced. And how am I supporting a 3-year-old? So that was really stressful. I did the one thing I thought I could do, which was go and get a job with Mary Maids because I can, a woman can't clean a house. So
Well, you've got to live. You've got to live.
you do, and so I moved in with my. Luckily, my parents were in the state at the time, so we moved in with my parents, my son and I got a job at Mary Maids. However, that didn't last long because I was in a extreme car accident. Um,
Yeah, and here's
during
the
during
next
my
part,
job.
it's almost like, when you're on a roll, you're on a roll. And yeah, talk us through
Yeah,
this. So if things couldn't get worse, from the being shattered from your whole marriage situation, it's like then this
the
near fatal car accident gets added into the equation. And what did you call it? You called that year your year of,
my year of hell because so much horrible stuff happened to me that year. Um, the divorce, I was at ground zero. I was shattered. I had to find a job. I found one. Then I went. What happened was I went on vacation. I came back from vacation that Monday. When I went back to work after vacation was the day that I was in the car accident. I was a passenger, and a van hit my side of the car at 50 miles an hour. They
wow.
had to use the jaws of life to get me out. I had 3 broken ribs that broke in, punctured my lung, so I was not able to breathe very well at all, and just bruises all over my body. And then I had eventually had to have surgery on my shoulder for bone chips. And
Mm.
the worst part was that I now couldn't work. And then I went through a whole nother stress with workers' comp and them denying my pay while I was off of work.
That is bad. I've seen how compensation and insurance has literally broken and crippled people, just because of the way that it's all set up and the system, and it's debilitating. In fact, I worked with so many different people on insurance, and they were in their right to be compensated. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't one person that I can honestly say that I saw what it did to their life. They deserve that compensation, but from where that whole situation stood of being on the other side, versing the insurance, you get treated like, I'm not sure if it's the same in America, but it just so happens that most of the cases I've seen have happened in Australia. And you are treated like a criminal for as
Mm-hmm.
long as
Yep.
until you get finally compensated. And then one particular case where the woman was so incredibly gifted. Honestly, I've never seen, she did a lot of spiritual work with me, and she'd had an accident and she went through a compensation claim, and I watched it just ruin her life. It was just horrible. But hopefully you did come through yours a lot easier than what had been. And obviously too, now you've got rejection issues, you've got the mind body big blow with what happened in your marriage, and then this car accident. What do you feel, if you look at it, if you take a big quantum leap into the future from there and look at what healed you physically and mentally, what would you put it down to? Because I know that whatever healed you, that is what you're helping other people with now yourself.
So yeah, and there was an additional, my belief system totally got derailed after that too, spiritually. So and what really starting from a ground from ground zero, it was all about discovering who I was, because I had always been a doormat. I had always been a people pleaser, do whatever I had to make sure that nobody got mad at me, and to make sure that everything was okay for them no matter how horrible it was for me. So when I got to ground zero, it was starting over with, one, being okay to be alone with myself. Two, learning who I was and what I really wanted, and reconnecting with a spiritual side of me that I had stuffed down in childhood because it didn't feel safe to me. And that combination of things, of learning all the different parts of me again, really started the healing process. And it wasn't overnight. It took time, and it took going through different things, a lot of journaling. I had coaches. I went through different types of healing sessions and modalities to really get back to my center, not the center that I was before, because they were two
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it too, because you have a natural spiritual gift, a lot of the modalities, this is what I find, and especially in my own work, you can take a modality, and it may be something like neuro-linguistic programming, but you can take that modality and reformulate it so that it has this beautiful healing process
Mhm.
that literally can recode, rewire, and refire. And just to give you a little example, we had one lady that had been in a really bad car accident, and she'd come to see me back in clinic days. And, you know, what we did was a very, very, I mean, bringing our spiritual gifts into it, because I know you're that way too, Bridget.
Mhm.
But what we did was we firstly had to learn about what that car accident was there for. What was the purpose? What
Mhm.
was the purpose? Because we believe, and you would know this, that we believe that everything has an ultimate purpose. So once I took her through this closed eye kind of trance, and we raised her up, and we got her to go back to before the actual car accident,
Mhm.
and then look down. And then from there, because you're right up here, you know how it is. You're up here, you're looking down. This is rewind, zip, like a sliding door.
Mhm.
And you're kind of like looking down but then you're looking right across to the other side where you are in years to come, where this is linked to that.
Mhm.
And then I asked the question, what is it that you had to learn? Can I ask what your car accident taught you? What was the biggest learning for you? Rewinding the clock, being outside of it, up above, looking at Bridget today of who you are as the most incredible alchemist healer and that spiritual guide for other spiritual people. What is it that was the purpose for you to have gone through that?
So I needed to be broken open so that I could remember who I was, that I could remember my light, so that I could move back into who I am and bring that gift to the world, which was the original gift I was meant to bring, but had shut down for so many years because of rejection, because of feeling different, because of wanting to belong
Wow.
so much that I hid myself.
Oh my gosh, that is gold. So it's almost like, okay, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, I mean, the rejection, see how those landmarks, and then you get to, the little girl, and then you get to the 27-year-old, and you find out that your husband comes out of the closet, and then you have this accident and it cracks the code
Mhm,
and you realize it's to go. And I've heard you use the word ground zero a few times.
mhm,
And one of the biggest things that I know spiritual leaders will say is if you burnt everything to the ground, how are you going to build it and start again? And
yeah.
so what I'm really hearing, that is gold. And interestingly enough, when the person is able to go back and see it from that standpoint, it actually has a massive healing impact as well. It's
Does.
like, well, subconscious mind has learned what it needs to learn now. So it's actually now it's okay to actually move on. It's okay now to become the person that you were born to be. And so, with your own intuition, I just want to say that you obviously, apart from all the healing you did, which it sounds like me when I went through my healing process, I did several different elements. Some were bigger accreditations and some were just little certifications like NLP, for example. And then I went through masters and even presentation stage presenting. But then I did my accreditation in hypnosis. But you sort of add other things to your belt too, don't you? Like
Mhm,
psychological kinesiology and
mhm.
reflexology, or there's a lot of people that do human design. What have been some of your greatest, I guess,
Mm.
experiences through the methodologies that you now teach? That, and by the way, you teach and you can heal at the absolute speed of light. I'm just going to add that. What do you reckon are some of the most profound modalities?
Um, well, I know for the deep stuff that I have worked through, that would be the RIM training that I went through. And when you go through the training, you get this done over and over to you, and you work through so much, you know, all the past stuff, even down into childhood and what you might have experienced in the womb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow. Wow.
that was a huge healing for me, and that brought a lot of light back into me. And I remember going from one time of meeting with the group to about a year later, and they were like, "You have totally changed." My shyness was gone. Um, my fears and anxiety about putting myself out there weren't there anymore. I was loving myself, accepting who I was, and not caring what other people said, because I love Wayne Dyer, what other people think of me is none of my business. And I love him. I followed him for as long as I knew him. Uh, and just I started to really take in all of those different trainings from different speakers, and you can call them gurus or whatever, spiritual people, motivational people. Zig Ziglar was one of I when in college I did training with and did a paper on Napoleon Hill. So all of that positive mindset, I use that, and it's gold.
It is. You've got a very similar history to me. I used to teach on the 18 laws of success. There was actually
Mhm.
16, but there was a couple that were hidden in a vault by Napoleon Hill,
Oh,
and his wife had locked them away. And then after he actually died, one came out, which is that interview with the devil where he used to, and the drifter,
mhm,
and the reference of the drifter being the person who doesn't have any kind of purpose in their life and they just drift.
mhm,
And he's kind of like having this talk with the devil. It was so interesting, but boy, it was a spiritual mind F because it really, well, it was actually a spiritual, complete, if you wanted to crack the code open. I was teaching a class of about 15 people, and it just really, it was like, Christmas time. They say the devil comes out, when the light is shining brightest. And at this
mhm,
time of the year, everyone's in full force. There's a lot of that work really happening around, even family and people on the road and anger. And this is how they say Napoleon Hill said that the one and the person who doesn't know their life purpose is like the drifter. But I won't
mhm.
go too far into it. But obviously RIM, and you've made it very known that this was something that copy wrote from somewhere else, so thank you
Yeah.
for that. And you've kind of taken that and formulated an incredible program. And the RIM stands for regenerating images in memory.
Mhm,
So obviously that therapeutic approach, that where it focuses on transforming the memories that are stored in the limbic system of the brain, and how those limbic memories associate with emotions and the processing of the emotional experiences. Can you kind of go in a little bit deeper and tell us in layman's terms, like how that works or what happens in that process?
so I can tell you from my experience. So
Please.
there's a facilitator, so somebody who's leading you through this, and I would, it was deep breathing, and then just close your eyes down if you want to, or keep them partially open or open, if whatever's most comfortable. And then really going into your body and sensing in your body what was showing up, and where there was something that was either not quite right, or seemed to call your attention. And so you go into that space, and then using your imagination and your bright brain, you go in there and you work through what's showing up, and you will have conversations with it. And so I would
Wow.
have conversations, like it was like having conversations with this, almost like having a conversation with your pain and stuff like that. And then it would take it can go even deeper, and I would wind up having I had a conversation with my younger self. And and through that process, connecting with it being okay, and loving on that little girl the little girl who was afraid, who was scared, finding out that, everybody did the best they could with trying to help her, and she was safe and she was okay. And then getting that feeling back to me, and incorporating that feeling then and that energy in colors and in light back into my body, into my system, and down back down into all of my bones and my muscles and my muscle memory and my emotional memory, to change that line of existence that I kept following down, an old habit, an old pattern of feeling fear because my inner child had been hurt.
That is so, so, so powerful. I love that. And it's interesting how a lot of the most powerful biohacking modalities that are, created through subconscious have that element where they will take you back and nurture that inner child. And instead of kind of like letting the pain be triggered, like when it comes up just by surprise when you least expecting it, it's about really turning off those triggers, isn't it? It's about really going back and being able to be with where it all stemmed from. And I love what you said about, revisiting that space and then, healing it and bringing the imagination up to give that inner child the, resources that he or she didn't have at the time. And, I think to myself as I hear you tell that story, no wonder I love this work, because I was always, and you were probably the same, I loved stories when I was a little girl. And, to be able to re explore memories or emotional experiences, especially with a safe person in a very, safe and controlled environment, just allows that person to just heal and transform at such a huge level. Now, I know you actually heal people, and you've just had a lady come back to you who is absolutely like amazed because she's actually gone through this and had such powerful outcomes with you. What was it that you feel was the biggest key that helped her to be guided through what you do, through your visualization and through your, that space that you create? What do you think was the biggest key for her?
So, in from what she said, and she even used the word big, because she emailed me directly after our session, because she's like, well, I'm in this space and feeling this big aha. And what it was is I took her through visualizations, a series of journeys to connect with her life purpose, her I am statement. And these journeys, although they seem disconnected, what I do is I take, and she even said this, I took the bits and pieces of what she said and I formulated, knowing who she is and what she was bringing forth and what her words were really saying and what her soul was showing. I formulated her I am statement, and she said I was dead on. And she felt so connected and ready to really move forward in her life with her journey as a grief coach.
Amazing. That's gold. I mean, what a gift. It's so rewarding to be able to, because when we're empowering as well other coaches, healers, and leaders, what we're doing is we're multiplying our transformational state. But there's one last part of this story that we're going to talk about, which I feel that is going to be a bit of an eye opener for coaches, healers, and leaders that are out there and really wanting to find the right mentor, really wanting to find the right program. And I do make the disclaimer that this is Bridget's experience, and we're going to go into it, but it's what happened when you had to go bankrupt as a result of getting involved with a program where you just found yourself drowning. But let's just go to a quick break. Have you enjoyed watching this episode? Is this giving you some inspiration? Well, I want you to know that every single person that we bring on the show is a passionate leader, coach, healer that really has the tools and the resources to change your life. And even when you're just listening here. So I want to ask you a favor. I want you to ask yourself the question, is there somebody you know that needs to hear this? And if so, make sure you share it. And make sure that if you have not subscribed to this channel, make sure you do, because subscribing means you're going to get more of our free transformational podcasts. Okay, so here we go. We're running to the end of our chat, but this, I feel, has to be said. I feel this is a really important piece because it's also a piece that I can actually very, very much relate to. Although I didn't go bankrupt and I didn't have to declare myself or do anything that way. But I know the tens of thousands of dollars that I spent. And I do want to say that everything I did with regards to becoming a coach, healer, trainer was the greatest investment of my life. And I probably could have bought a house with what I've invested in that. But from the point of coming into the online space, and this is the big grr right now, and I feel like not only is this my grr, but it's your grr. And I'll talk about the grr in just a moment because you're going to hear about Bridget's grr. But when I came into the online space, I suddenly kind of found myself into a pool of sharks drowning in an industry where everybody calls himself a coach. We're in an industry where, you know, it's a dime a dozen. There are so many coaches out there and there are so many people marketing. And I think, and this is something that is a point of my guru, and that is that when people say to you, you've got to do it now. Now, I understand that activating a decision is good, but Bridget's going to talk about what happened to her when she didn't activate the right decision and she didn't listen to something. So I just want to say that if you're listening to this, I feel that listen into the gold, because there's a few gold nuggets of what Bridget can share with you to avoid this happening in your world as you want to soar in your space as a coach. So over to you, Bridget, your, I guess, the experience.
Okay, so I went to an event, and there was an offer to be part of a mastermind, and it was a lot more money than I had. It was $50,000.
50,000 USD. Wow, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
and and you know the the speaker was so empowering, and really made me feel hopeful that I could get my business going. I could finally be the full-time coach, and I wanted it so much, and I wanted to believe that could happen for me so much that in order to pay for it, we actually had to use credit cards, and I couldn't even put them in my name. So I had to go to my husband and ask him to put them in his name. And um,
So you
begrudgingly,
hocked yourself. You basically hocked yourself and you know,
yeah,
basically put yours in. Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
yeah. And so did this, and all how you leave a place and you're all fired up and you're ready to go, and then there's the letdown. And there was a huge letdown. And that is that because I was still working full time, I couldn't attend all of the trainings and stuff that were being offered. And I felt like I was thrown in with a bunch of people, just another number, and I was drowning. I couldn't
Mm.
get clarity on who I was and what I was trying to do because I was
And that
just
and that makes the business, and that makes your magic kind of, did you find that? I found it was killing my magic
Mhm,
by, number one, when people hock themselves. I remember having a podcast with a lady. She wanted to be on my podcast show, right? And but the fact is that she was almost out of breath, and because she'd signed up to a program that was like yours, and it was, very, very hefty price tag, and she was like, she wanted to be on my podcast so much, but she was so anxious because she was in this desperational plight to
mhm,
make her money back. And
mhm,
because she was thrown into that feeling of total, like, she was just about out of breath. Like, when I
mhm.
was talking to her, I thought, how are we going to even, I'm going to have to do a session on her just to get her to kind of ground in and relax, because she was so anxious. It was horrible. And I thought, how on earth are you going to bring your magic through? And I said, how long are you tied up in this program for? A year. I thought, you mean you're going to be in this state for a year? What would you say to the people out there, coaches and healers, that are hocking them, or looking at $50,000 programs, or even, for that fact, programs that make you take your breath away and can't breathe because you just are so desperate to make it back?
Well, one of first thing I learned is don't make a decision on emotions. The second thing is if there is a deadline, like you have to make this decision, da 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 da. I say no now because
I
having
agree.
that deadline just pushes pushed my anxiety through the roof, and I felt like I had to do it or I was going to lose out on this big thing. But the big
Yeah,
thing that
but
I lost
I
was
mean,
me.
the whole FOMO thing, I think, takes on a different level. And I think this is where you and I, especially, and I'm going to come back to the guru now. And the guru is that we know that when we're helping people find their life purpose, that quite often it'll come back to their biggest pain that they've had, that's really catapulted them to move. It doesn't mean to say that we need to make our pain come from another coach, though, that
No.
where we're supposed to be catapulting. That's not what this is about. I think a lot of people are taking pain point out of context, and I'm here to make a stand to say that that pain point is not in the money that you're making and the decision you're making to get ahead, but in the true zone of genius that comes from your backstory. You've heard Bridget's backstory, you've heard where she came from, right from scratch. You'll understand you got the real deal right here. You'll understand that when you're working with this woman, your business will move forward, not because you're in such a anxiety to make sure that you're making, enough money to put food on the table at the end of the month, but you're coming into this beautiful, inspirational feeling of existence. So, like Bridget says, make sure, number one, you are following your gut.
Mhm.
And number two, make sure that you are not moving from a forced FOMO position that's going to put you into a forced, even worse, a FOMO, because that bankruptcy must have been a real wake up call for you, Bridget.
Yeah, it was so it was like for so long we were just treading water and we were constantly drowning and there was no hope. And it was the hardest decision because I felt guilt. I felt ashamed. I
Yes.
felt bad because I'd involved my husband. I felt like I was letting everybody and myself down. And it was very distressing. The hidden blessing was that the relief that came when the bankruptcy was finalized and all of that credit card debt was gone
Mm,
and I
mm.
could breathe again. And it was
Yeah,
that whole 2 years I didn't breathe.
yeah. Yeah, I hear you, because I heard that lady who was involved in a very expensive program and she wasn't breathing very well at all. I was very worried. So let's just go through for those of you. Now, I am sure that even if you are not an alchemist or a spiritual person that's wanting to go to the next level, I wouldn't mind betting that if you've been listening to Bridget, that you are definitely a person who wants to unlock your purpose and really be able to renew your life and get rapid results. And this is absolutely Bridget's zone of genius. And, so unlocking your intuition and regenerating yourself from those memories and creating a new brain, basically with pathways that are going to give you lasting change. Also, being able to balance your blueprint and take the overwhelm out of your life, and learn how you can shine. And I know that I could say, and I can stand here and say, with hand on heart, that Bridget in her programs can take people and get them to feel like they have made a huge shift in one session. But I know that the program that Bridget's giving you, even when it is in a program with other people, you're going to have a tailor made experience. That's going to be tailor made to make sure that you are living and expressing your purpose. You are revitalizing the neuro pathways and allowing yourself to heal past trauma and really boost your business through this, concept of 80% energy, 20% strategy, because that's the true formula. Would you agree? And obviously, this is about your program, Bridget. So, why would you agree? I mean, that's probably a better question. Why would you agree that 80% is so much of our success, is so much about us having healing over our limitations, our past memories, our triggers? Why do you think it's more important than, bringing 20% strategy into it?
Um, because it's important because all of that inner stuff is the stuff that creates the bad habits, the inner critic, the people pleasing, the lack of boundaries, the feelings of not enough. So with all of that in the way, you can have as many goals as you want. You can set as many, steps, but until you heal all of that and create a foundation of self-love, your foundation for success is going to be rocky and probably fall apart.
Oh, beautifully said. Absolutely. I could not agree more. Developing this whole mastery of what Bridget's bringing to your life is creating that rock solid foundation for you to reset your mastery and really clarify how you can be the catalyst to change through your experience, just like you see what Bridget and I are doing right here. So you can regain your clarity, develop your intuition, or really hone your intuition and tap into your life purpose. So your transformative alchemy sprint, and I call it a sprint because it happens so fast in your program of harnessing these people's power. I love to ask this question at the end of my podcast, but when we get off and you're going to go to sleep and you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to feel very amazing about this, if there was one thing you wished you would have said on the show that you'd like to share, what would that be? Because we're going to get that out of the way right now.
If there's one thing, I think when it comes down to it all, through the healing, through the love, through the forgiveness, we get to be ourselves for the first time sometimes, and we get to shine a light and bring our gifts to the world that we were meant to bring here and celebrate who we are full out no apologies, without judgment, and gift the world something great to make a difference so that we can live lives that we love and not lives of quiet desperation anymore.
Bridget, thank you so very, very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.